Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. After days of deliberations, jurors reach a deadlock.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's my understanding you're at an impasse.
What this could mean for the Ohio doctor accused of patient murder. Plus, Infowars files for bankruptcy as Alex Jones is slammed with defamation lawsuits in the Sandy Hook school shooting case. But first, it's week 2 of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard.
Mr. Depp told you that he felt the majority of his issues with his wife had been from him using drugs and alcohol.
According to the note, yes.
The highlights of day 4 of testimony. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmeyer. At the start of week 2, jurors get a closer look into the relationship of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. On Monday, experts testified about an incident when the tip of Depp's finger was cut off. The exes now face off in a multi-million-dollar defamation suit stemming from a 2018 Washington Post op-ed written by Heard. While Depp's name was not mentioned in the piece, Heard alleges she was a victim of domestic abuse. Depp argues he lost roles in both the Harry Potter and Pirates of the Caribbean franchises because of Heard's accusations. After that, Depp filed a defamation suit against Heard to the tune of $50 million. Heard countersued for $100 million. On Monday of this week, jurors heard the second half of the video deposition of Depp's former doctor, David Kipper. He detailed what happened when the tip of Depp's finger was cut off while in Australia.
I went in to instruct one of the people with him to look for the tip of the finger, hoping that we would be able to put it back.
Was the tip of the finger found?
It was found.
When you went into the house, did you see Miss Heard?
Yes.
And how did she appear?
She was certainly upset.
Was Miss Heard's face swollen at all when you saw her?
Not that I was aware of, no.
Did Miss Heard have any cuts on her arms when you saw her?
Not that I can recall.
Did you recall seeing any cuts on her feet or any other part of her body?
I can't recall.
If Miss Heard had appeared to have been injured, is this something that you would have documented?
Yes.
Jurors also heard video depositions from Debbie Lloyd, the former personal nurse of Depp's. She told jurors about Depp's recovery.
You wrote bandage changed and hand exercises done at appointment with surgeon's office. Per RN at surgeon's office and occupational therapist, hand is healing well and finger has good range of motion. Exercises to be done 3 to 5 times per day. Patient is in good spirits and said he's not smoked marijuana in 3 days. States he feels majority of his issues with his wife have been from him using drugs and alcohol. Patient states he will no longer sneak, use, and wants to enjoy clarity. You wrote that?
Yes.
Okay. And these are part of your nurse's notes?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Depp told you that he felt the majority of his issues with his wife had been from him using drugs and alcohol?
According to the note, yes.
And Mr. Depp wrote he will no longer sneak, use, and wants to enjoy clarity?
According to the document, yes.
What is being referred to as no longer sneak, use?
I only know what's stated in my notes.
Okay. Would it be anything other than drugs or alcohol?
I don't recall.
Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Mike Correspondent and co-host Terry Austin. Mike, this trial started off as a she said, he said type of situation, but as more and more witnesses testify, how are Depp's lawyers doing in coloring Heard as a certain type of person, and what type is that?
I think they're doing very well, and they're doing very well because he was surrounded by professionals. When I say professionals, I mean doctors. We see nurses here, and they have ethical obligations to keep accurate notes. So they're more credible than the average person in the sense that they're not only living up to a person's obligation to tell the truth, but their profession makes them keep records that need to be truthful. So I think they're gaining credibility for Mr. Depp with every one of these professionals who refer to their notes to lay out how this occurred.
Now, Terry, have you heard any bit of the cross-examination? Because that's where Heard may be able to piece together some of her story in this case, in the cross-examinations of Dr. Kipper or Debbie Lloyd that may have helped Heard's counterclaim, or do you think she's just waiting to put on her witnesses and her testimony?
I don't think any of the cross-examination really helped Amber's case. She's going to have to rely primarily on her own witnesses. Dr. Kipper was the far more credible witness. He was very supportive of Depp's position. He's the internist, he's the addiction specialist. And while some of his answers he did say, I don't recall, most of his answers were very definitive. He basically said that there was no violence reported. He basically said he never saw any evidence of violence. So he was very strong. As far as Nurse Lloyd was concerned, she didn't recall anything. We may as well have just read her notes. And I think even though she did say she didn't see violence and nobody told her that they were violent to each other, she basically wasn't credible. And I don't think the jury is going to appreciate her testimony.
Yeah, I understand from a legal standpoint why she has to say, I don't recall, but after a couple hours of that, I can see why many jurors and many viewers may doze off in that case, but we'll keep eyes on it as it continues. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, Alex Jones's company files for bankruptcy amidst a slew of defamation lawsuits. But first, we dig deeper into the defamation suit of Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Jesse Weber is at the Fairfax County Courthouse, where fans on both sides of the aisle are making news. Welcome back. We continue coverage now in the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation lawsuit. The second week of the lawsuit began amidst controversy after a Heard supporter is banned from the courtroom for the remainder of the trial. Law&Crime Network's Jesse Weber joins us in Fairfax, Virginia, explaining what happened and who Eve Barlow is.
Hey there, Brian. So Monday began with the continued testimony of Dr. David Kipper, but the real drama happened on Friday when the judge banned Eve Barlow from the courtroom after an interruption on Thursday. Now, according to documents that were obtained by Law&Crime, Depp's attorneys had filed the motion to ban Barlow, and it was granted on Friday. You might recall that on Thursday, Law&Crime's own Anjanette Levy saw Barlow escorted from the courtroom after she was apparently on her cell phone. Barlow, who was seen arriving to court with Heard, is accused of tweeting in that courtroom where cell phones are banned and then misrepresenting information to her attorneys. Now, notably on Thursday, Depp witness Gina Deuters was dismissed by the judge and her testimony struck from the record after she admitted to watching clips of the trial. Just before this, Barlow showed Heard's attorneys a social media post by Deuters discussing Depp's separate defamation case against the Sun tabloid.
That was Jesse Weber reporting from Fairfax County, Virginia, rain or shine. Outside the courthouse, Law&Crime Network correspondents have also heard from Johnny Depp supporters. At the start of the trial, dozens of supporters gathered outside the courthouse with Justice for Johnny signs. They told reporters they were there to support Depp. At the time, only one Heard supporter was seen outside the courthouse. On Monday of this week, Law&Crime's Jesse Weber spoke with a woman originally from Peru who came to the courthouse with two alpacas wearing a Justice for Johnny sign.
When you hear the allegations that are put against him, you don't believe them?
No, not at all. I mean, a guy that does what he does and how he does it is just not believable at all.
So what do you think of Amber Heard?
I don't want to say nothing bad about her, but I don't believe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping for at the end of this case?
I hope he gets justice, that's all. Whatever the judge sees fit, I just hope that he can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll support him no matter what?
I mean, yeah, there's no proof against him, really. So as long as that remains that way, of course.
You don't think he's ever hurt anyone?
No.
You
I
think
don't.
there were lies made about him?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Why?
It's just the way that they say it, the way that they phrased it, it's just, I'm not sure, it's just, I don't believe it, really.
Gotta be a Law&Crime first, Jesse Weber and two alpacas. Terry, we saw that Gina Deuters was excused and her testimony was stricken from the record. What exactly happened there?
All right, so just to give you a little background, Gina is Depp's friend, and she was on the stand. She was testifying on behalf of Depp. Eve Barlow is Amber's friend, and she was sitting in court near Amber, and she gave that note to Amber's attorney saying that Gina had tweeted about, quote, the trial. The tweet was actually about the London trial, but the judge interrupted Gina's testimony, and basically she questioned her and asked her if she had seen any clips of this trial. So when Gina said yes, she had to be excused because, of course, there was a formal witness sequestration order in place, meaning that these witnesses can't hear any of the trial. So that's why she dismissed her from the court, and that is why all of her testimony was excluded.
All right, Mike, we've heard the breakdown there from Terry. Now the question for you is, do you agree that her testimony should have been completely excluded? Do you think the judge maybe went a little too far? Could there possibly have been a less dramatic solution, like a middle ground here?
I'm sure there could be a debate about that, but quite frankly, the sequestration order is such a basic sort of logical step to keep trials as honest as they could be, where people are not trying to make stories match other witnesses. It's very difficult. People don't realize as attorneys sometimes when we call witnesses, we can't discuss what other witnesses testified with them. So I think the judge did the right thing here, and I don't think it would be of any appellate argument or value to have left her on and tried to clean it up, because I think it's better to remove that testimony totally.
Yeah, it's all moving chess pieces at this point when it comes to witnesses. But from what we're hearing, and I don't think Jesse heard it from the alpacas, but Depp may actually testify on Tuesday, and that's going to be the big one too. I know you're laughing, Mike, but the alpacas can give in good information sometimes. And so if Depp does testify, I think that's going to be the majority of the case. We'll see how that plays off, and of course, give you updates here on Law and Crime Daily. And switching coasts now to California, as a woman formally pleads guilty to faking a 2016 abduction. Sherri Papini pled guilty Monday morning in federal court on 2 charges, mail fraud and lying to an officer. The charges date back to November 2016, when Papini allegedly went missing. 22 days later, she was found on an interstate about 150 miles south from where she was reported missing. Papini claimed 2 Hispanic women and a dark SUV abducted and tortured her. Her ex-boyfriend told investigators Papini actually stayed with him during those 3 weeks, and that she inflicted those injuries, including branding herself, on her own. Papini was married with 2 children at the time. According to court documents, Papini will pay more than $300,000 in restitution to the agencies involved in the search for her. While prosecutors say they will recommend reduced sentences, the charges could carry up to 25 years behind bars. Papini is set to be sentenced in June. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, after days of deliberations, jurors reach a deadlock in Ohio. Plus, far-right website Infowars files for bankruptcy as frontman Alex Jones faces multiple defamation suits. Our legal analysis after the break. Welcome back. A busy weekend for law enforcement across the country as dozens of people were injured in 3 mass shootings over the Easter and Passover weekend. 2 in South Carolina and the 3rd in Pittsburgh. 2 teenagers were killed and at least 8 others were injured after a shooting at a party in Pittsburgh. It happened at a home rented through the short-term rental company Airbnb. Police say more than 90 shots rang out early Sunday morning at the party attended by as many as 200 people. This came just a day after someone opened fire at a busy mall in Columbia, South Carolina. 9 people were shot at the crowded mall Saturday, and 5 others were injured in a stampede during the gunfire. 2 people have been arrested in connection to the shooting, Marquise Robinson and Jawayne Price, who is on house arrest after making bail. Price claims he shot his pistol in self-defense. He's been charged with unlawfully carrying a firearm. 9 people were injured in another shooting Sunday at a lounge hosting an Easter bash in South Carolina. No deaths have been reported. The 3 mass shootings are just the latest string of a surge of gun violence across the country. Switching gears now, far-right website Infowars files for bankruptcy amidst defamation lawsuits stemming from Alex Jones's comments about the Sandy Hook school shooting. Jones, the frontman behind the Infowars site, faces multiple defamation suits for referring to the school shooting as a hoax. Infowars and 2 other companies owned by Jones have now filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Court documents show Infowars states it has assets of $0 to $50,000 with liabilities of $1,001 to $10 million. All this comes as a judge rules Jones will recoup $75,000 originally paid in fines to a Connecticut court. Jones was initially fined for not showing up to his deposition, but the money was ordered to be returned after Jones went to a rescheduled deposition. Relatives of the 20 children and 6 educators killed in the Sandy Hook massacre sued Jones, claiming they've been harassed and have received death threats from Jones's followers. An August court date is set for that case to determine how much Jones owes in damages. In a separate case out of Texas, Jones was found liable for similar damages. He is scheduled to be in court for that case later this month. All right, Terry, kind of just break it down for us. What does filing for bankruptcy mean for Jones in terms of these civil suits?
Well, Jones actually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy as far as Infowars is concerned, and that was filed in Texas. Chapter 11 basically is putting whatever pending civil litigation is going on hold. So it gives the organization a chance to reorganize, essentially, but they can continue to operate. And it's often used by these big corporations to help them stay in business. So they will pay their creditors back, but it's going to be on a very low percentage of what was originally owed. At least the hope is that some of the monies will be paid back. But listen, there are many plaintiffs suing for defamation. And if in fact he says he has very little money, the percentage that they get will be very little.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to ask Mike about, because when we look at the potential harm and the damages for calling this massacre a hoax, how high could these damages be? And do we actually see these families collecting every penny, or is it something else?
Well, it's always difficult with class action suits because the numbers may be large when we look at them, but when you look at all the people who are members of the class that are putting forth the action, is the money is really not there for them. A lot of the money in these huge cases gets eaten up by the attorneys and the investigation. One of the things here too is, let's not forget, when you file for bankruptcy, you should be very careful because those are certified and you're swearing to the truth of the things you're doing. So if people are looking for assets, they may go beyond this bankruptcy to see if this in fact is a legitimate bankruptcy. So he may not be solving problems and he may be creating others. So it's very complicated.
Yes, the age-old phrase of it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. So you're definitely expecting some of these people to look into this bankruptcy. Great point there, Mike. When we come back, Ohio versus William Husel. After weeks of testimony and days of deliberation, jurors reach a deadlock. But does that mean a hung jury? That's ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Jurors say they are at an impasse as deliberations continue into day 4, Monday. In the case of former ICU physician William Husel, an Ohio doctor accused of killing more than a dozen patients over the course of 3 years. Prosecutors say Husel ordered lethal doses of fentanyl to be administered to patients from 2015 until 2018 at Mount Carmel Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. He faces 14 murder charges. His defense team argues Husel was giving end-of-life comfort care and not attempting to shorten the lives of his patients. Originally, the former doctor was charged in the deaths of 25 patients, but 11 of those charges were dropped earlier this year. Over the course of the weeks-long trial, jurors heard from several people who worked alongside Husel and the family members of the several alleged victims. On Monday, just before court broke for lunch, the judge read what is called a Howard charge because the jury was deadlocked. The charge instructing the jury to continue deliberations once they returned. If convicted, Husel faces the possibility of life in prison. Jurors can also consider a lesser offense of attempted murder for each of the 14 counts. The jury was sent home Monday afternoon after a verdict was still not reached. Mike, I don't know what it is, but what do you think the jury is stuck on in deciding this case that's still having them deliberate to another day?
I think this jury is stuck on the fact that there are no professional standards that were introduced to show that this doctor went off the accepted science in his field of medical care. And I think that really gives a lot of flexibility here. And the law shouldn't be that flexible where it's so tough to defend. And I think that's really what the jurors having a problem is. At the end of the day, he really didn't put off the inevitable. And I think people are saying he was aiding people.
That's an interesting argument because if he's convicted, that argument could feed into an appeal of unconstitutionally vague as to the crime. And based on what you're saying, he could win. Now, Terry, Husel was charged with 14 counts of murder. Why do you think the court allowed the attempted murder charges to also be added?
You know, it's very strange to me because usually when you allow a lesser included offense, it's based on the evidence, but that lesser included offense and the higher offense basically have to have the same element. So you have something like a manslaughter is a lesser included offense of murder, or an assault is a lesser included offense of rape. But here it's very difficult to understand why with the original charge of murder, the judge is going to allow the lesser included of attempted murder, because obviously with attempted murder, the person doesn't die. Here's my guess. I think the only witness that came in for the defense testified that essentially in order to determine whether or not these people died, he thinks that it wasn't because of the medication. So maybe that's the reason. But
yeah, maybe Husel tried, but he wasn't the cause. Yeah, we'll see. Well, thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.